Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello all, welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist here with you, and I have another treat for you this evening as we're going to be, well, I should say evening, day, whenever you're listening to this. But I also want to begin with a classy reminder that this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only, does not constitute working with a licensed mental health professional. Please seek one out in your area to work on your unique issues. So as I was saying, we have another unique interview tonight. This is another one of my ONYX brothers, and actually it was also one of the pledges I oversaw who came to join our organization, but they're many-faceted in multiple other areas as well, including work on gay men's health and especially advocacy for those of Middle Eastern and North African ancestry as well. So tonight we're talking with Johnny Tohme. I'm probably going to ask you to have to repronounce that because I always screw up names, who is an LGBTIQ rights activist and a clinical psychological graduate from Lebanon, Middle East. His career started in sexual health services provisional, including mental health. He also worked in community behavioral research and has also involved in multiple local initiatives around utilizing drama therapy for community health. Or community healing. In 2014, he founded and directed community networks for gay men's health and rights in the Middle East and North African countries, before moving to the U.S. in 2016. Since then, he's been the senior community mobilizing manager at M-Pact, Global Action for Gay Men's Health and Rights, focusing on partnerships building, advocacy, fund mobilization, and sexual health awareness. Johnny, welcome to Untying Knots.
Thank you, Perry. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. And even though after all this time, how do you pronounce your last name? Even though we've known you
don't worry about it.
This long, because I know how I just seem to screw up everyone's name even though I'm trying.
No, not a problem. Even when I introduce myself, I kind of use an Americanized version of it because some people find it hard to pronounce Tohme, which is like phonetically, it's hard for those who do not speak certain languages. In my case, it's an Arabic last name. But basically, I just say Tohme. And yeah. So.
Which also then gets into the aspect of how we're taught to break down words to be able to pronounce them. In many cases, we don't get that education. And I've forgotten some of mine. So
no problem.
So how did you get into all of this? Well, or I should say, how did you get here?
I mean, it's definitely been a journey. It's a never-ending journey. You touched on some of that in the bio. Growing up in Lebanon, and I grew up in north of the country in a small conservative Christian Catholic town, and I had a really happy childhood, great family. My internal journey per se started when I started realizing that, well, now I can say that I'm gay or I'm a queer person. Like all other queer people, feeling different and feeling out of place, feeling you're the only one. At a young age, that kind of got me reflecting a lot on life. Luckily, I was always surrounded by love. And then, in a way to escape some of that and being brought up Catholic, now I know that one of my ways of dealing with that was I went to a monastery to become a monk, and I stayed there for 2 years, and that's where I got really into this lifestyle of reflection, given that the order I joined was very about meditation and not about going out to the public much. And during that process, I started reading a lot about psychology, trying to understand why and how I am the way I am. Funny enough, I was also very interested in becoming an exorcist. So I started reading a lot about that, which included a lot of psychology also. Theoretically, exorcists need to be able to differentiate between a psychotic break or an actual possession. So all roads led me to like psychology. And I left and I instantly went and studied psychology. I was the happiest with that. And I started doing a little bit of one-on-one type therapy when I worked at a sexual health center, but I found myself more interested in community health in general. That's when I learned how to work in research and started working more in community mobilization and finding my own community, which led me to starting an organization that is part of it is around building community. And since I moved here to the US, that has been a big part of my work. Hence my title is community mobilization, as well as looking for another local community around kink and leather, which is another main part of me. And that's where I found ONYX, and that's how we met.
Yes, we did. Yeah, so as I said, I had the honor of being your pledge master and seeing you through our program to become a full member. But in that, also that standpoint is like finding that balance between the kink, between being LGBT, being also having an identity in an area that oftentimes is not particularly very welcoming around it. That builds a lot of character. Not to mention, you've just shown that the sections they don't show in all those Exorcist movies about their psych degrees.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, psychology is a very big realm, and you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about others. And I really took a lot of lessons to heart, how to work on myself, how to connect with other people, and the importance of community. I mean, if anything, I've learned from learning and working in psychology and in therapy is that one of the main things that really could uplift and support people is a community. My thesis when I got my master's was around how social support could come in to the lives of queer people and pull them out from depression or suicidal ideation. And that was kind of, I was looking at these variables, and community support was one main thing that is a lifesaver. And since then, it's always been something important. I love my community and I love to build community for others.
And what are you seeing right now where we're sitting with community as a whole? I mean, considering where we are after these last 3 years in dealing with COVID and then the further years of dealing with certain political powers.
Yeah, it definitely was a big shift, and not everyone was able to make that shift into a virtual community. I was lucky enough that working in a global organization, a lot of my work is global, and I built connection with people all around the world, and we're in touch. And we're not just colleagues or working together; we become friends because we're activists. We're working on a mission together. So I was able to find my global community and stay connected to it easier. But I was able to see around me that not everyone was able to do that, and it was really hard. And I think all of us trying to find ways to staying in touch with people that we feel they uplift us and putting an effort into it. It doesn't come easy. It doesn't happen on its own. It's so easy to kind of get carried away with your own things and forget about your community. And also being that person for others is very, realizing that as much as you want someone to support you, someone is out there needing your support.
And how is that translated into what you can share about the work on the global AIDS crisis?
Yes, I mean, going back into the history of HIV and the history of activism within the field of HIV, it's funny now. I live in San Francisco, where a lot of it started. It all started with community. I mean, governments and people in power were not willing to do anything about it because the majority of people affected and lives changed were from our communities and other communities of people who were vulnerable. Sex workers, drug users, trans people, and it took people coming together, forming a community, and leading that fight for things to start changing. And it would not have changed if people didn't come together. So, as much as we would like to professionalize activism, which I'm totally for, people need to be able to put time into something and live by it and get paid and all of that. But I think we lost a little bit of that community sense and people just naturally coming together to fight for the cause. I see it more here in the US than I see it globally, because the situation definitely is different. The pandemic is still different. It is still an epidemic on a large scale in a lot of different countries, especially among our communities. Infection and incident rate for HIV are not like here. They're still going up in some countries and in some regions around the world. And given criminalizing laws and stigma and discrimination, it's harder to build communities to fight that. And that's a big part of what we try to do at my organization, which is to help mobilizing people and building communities, but also providing a safe environment. So while we're working directly with people on the ground on country level to build capacities, to learn new skills, to learn how to advocate, to come together as a community, in parallel, we work with policymakers and we try to put pressure into enabling the environment around them, the legal environment and the social environment, for it to be safer for our communities to thrive. Because, the goal is not just the absence of HIV, the goal is the presence of positive sexual health components and values. A big part of sexual health, even by its definition, includes the word pleasure. It's a pleasurable sexual life. So it's not just the absence of a disease or of an infection. It's also the presence of all the positive value of sex and pleasure and sexual health. And that's another thing that we also work on.
And that is for M-Pact or M-Pact. And how did that name come up, and how can we make that more of a household name for people?
Well, M-Pact is, so the organization started in 2006, and it was a direct response to lack of investment in communities of gay, bisexual men, including trans men, and within the HIV response. And it was the International AIDS Conference at the time that happens every 2 years and gathers people from around the world with different expertise and backgrounds. And that group of people decided to start a global network of community members and work on these issues. And it was called the Global Forum on MSM and HIV. MSM is a more of a technical term used in the health field for men who have sex with men. Since not everyone who does that self-identify as gay or queer, especially around the world in different countries. We have to realize this terminology and ideology in a lot of ways is still primarily Western or colonial. So people have different ways of expressing their identities. So that was the name. MSMGF was the acronym until we changed it into M-Pact, M-P-A-C-T, just to move a little bit away from just the health direction, understanding that people are a full individual with all of their different components and facets as individuals. It's not just about the behavior that they engage in, it's about who they are as individuals. M in the name, so it's a play on impact, having an impact, not impact play,
right?
Which is something I would love to, but it's a play on impact and the desire to have an impact on this world. But it's M for the MSM, reminiscent of that without saying it. And the pact is really about doing a pact with ourselves and with our community to work together. And that's where the name is M-Pact. The full name is M-Pact, Global Action on Gay Men's Health and Rights. But our website is, mpactglobal.org. People can read more about it and find out more about the work that we do and how they can support as well.
All righty. So what can you say more about the experiences for men of Middle East and North African countries being LGBT in these areas? Because again, there's all the stories that do show up on the news and the ones that don't. What is more about realizing the real experience and lived experience that's there?
Yes. I mean, I can speak to my own and that of people around me or people who have reached out to me with their stories. The Middle East and North African region is around 24 countries, right? So even within one country, the lived experience of queer people is totally different from each other. And a lot of factors play into it, including, class, education, geographical area within that specific country. And, luck sometimes if you found people that could be around you and protect you. In the MENA region, the way we call it, Middle East, North Africa, MENA region, there are countries that still could be punishable by death. And you have countries where it's not very explicit, but there are laws that are used to criminalize gay people. And all of those laws were colonizers' laws. They were inherited from Britain and France mainly, who have colonized the region in the past. So, for example, in Lebanon, we're colonized by France. And we inherited the penal code that says every sexual intercourse against nature is punishable by law. So that's how they define. They say it's a sexual intercourse against nature, and then it becomes up to the law or the judge even to apply that on same-sex sexual behavior. And it has been in the past for a long time. But in the past, I would say 7 to 10 years, we've started seeing some judges who are, standing up and saying this does not apply on gay people because gay sex is not unnatural. And trying to void that law bit by bit so it won't be used as much. But also there are other things that could be used against queer people, public decency laws and a lot of that. So you can imagine that, once you realize that you're part of this community, you start thinking, I'm a criminal. And whether you are actively experiencing that, you're always living with that idea in your head, and it has a weight on you, whether you realize it or not. Leading your life knowing that at any minute things could change for whatever reason. You had for whatever political goal. Sometimes when some policymakers or people in power want to prove a point or want to scapegoat someone if something is going bad, like we've seen it around the world around COVID, for example. Gay people are the first to be like, it's your fault, and religious men be like, this is the fault of gay people. And so any minute things could change. Personally, I've had it easy. I've been lucky. When I was in Lebanon, I was able to come out to my siblings at first and my close friends, and I've never had to be closeted in any work that I did. I mean, from day one, I worked in organizations that were either gay-led or were full of gay people just because of the work that we do. I never had to hide who I am, and then I did end up coming out to my parents, and they were accepting, and my husband and I visit often, and they love him. But I know that's not the case for a lot of other people. Some people have been kicked out of their house. Some people had to flee the country. Some people were put in jail, were beaten, were discriminated against. So you have all varieties of experiences. Again, it goes back into class, it goes back into education, it goes back into if you have a community support around you.
Oh, and that's the things that people need to remember when looking at these stories that come out from these other parts of the world. Yes, definitely. And, this is, when I started working more on the regional level, I started seeing, how many different experiences queer people have in the North African region, and how little protection we have. And it's such a shame because I know brilliant people had to leave the region, and my driver was more my heart that took me out of Lebanon. I was not running away, as I said. I was good there, but I know for a lot of other people they had to run away, and those were brilliant minds. And it's such a shame because on a lot of issues, and you notice it here, you notice it everywhere. Queer people tend to lead the charge, not just on queer issues, on women issues, on migration issues, on race issues. They're always there at the front because they know they know injustice as well. When we know how much it's not right and it's not just to be discriminated against, to be treated less. So we're always there for every cause.
And the more queer people have to flee where they live, the less there are people left there to lead the fight. But again, every person deserves to live safely and to thrive, and wherever place they find they want to go to, by all means.
Very much so. Very much so. And encourage that, because we all just want to live.
Exactly.
So with all of these the changes and shifts that you're working with, where do you see the psychology playing in all of this? And especially in this community building that you're working on now, with the support of your organization and others?
I mean, it starts with me personally, because I feel my studies and my relation with my colleagues when we were studying, the work that we did, all of it together made of me someone who is very comfortable taking the time and really listening to others and trying to find a solution that works for them. And I think applying that on all of the work that I'm doing is really helpful. And even more so now that I work on a global level, and now whether I like it or not, although I'm 100% Arab, I've lived there for 30 years. I've only been here for 7 years. I do recognize my privilege. I do recognize that my American passport that I have 2 years now gives me privilege. I do realize that living in San Francisco gives me privilege. So when I work with other people, I need to understand where they come from, even if we share the same background. Psychology really helps me with that. It helps me a lot with community building, with being able to be there for the people around me the way that I want them to be there for me. And I think it goes both. I think in order for you to be a successful any type of professional within the psychology world, I think there had to be some sort of a prerequisite characteristic in your personality, and then the psychology comes and complement it. I mean, studying alone doesn't just do it. You learn theoretically, but you need to have some of that in your personality. And I think that that came from my family and the way I was brought up, to be mindful of others, to be empathetic, wish no harm to others, and try to help whenever you can. So when psychology came, it really complemented that.
And from this side of it would be really talking about what's the interpersonal relationship that's going on, and recognize it. It's also key to recognizing when it's lacking, and then expecting that there's going to be some sort of sense of community when there has been no interpersonal relationship whatsoever built. So yeah, and that's where a lot of things drop off.
Yes, definitely. And I feel it's funny because also everything that we're talking about, and we mentioned earlier about being part of ONYX and it's a kink and leather community, I also see a lot of similarities there. I see a lot of the main thing that I've learned in psychology and how I want to manage my regular social relationship or love relationship. I see all of that as a main component in a kink relationship, or even within the leather community. The open communication, really going on a journey to learn everything about yourself and being open to that with others, and knowing what they want, and agreeing on that. Which here comes consent, another main component within kink and leather, and community, which is another main thing. Which is, I think, why I also kind of once all of that started coming together, I felt like it's the right thing, it's the right community that I'm part of.
Very good. Very good. Well, I think that's a great place for us to take a break there. So folks, stay tuned. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with Johnny Tohme, age activist, and we will have more in our second half. So stay tuned, folks.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it. so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information.
Enjoying our shows and can't get enough of us? Follow us on Instagram at Voice America Talk Radio and see what we're cooking up for you.
You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. That's pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. This is Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with you for our second half with Tohme, licensed to the age activist. So one of the things, as mentioned earlier, we're both members of ONYX, which is the Leathermen of Color organization. And one of those things is, again, when we're looking at all of the, shall we say, stereotypes that come up about the idea of people of Middle Eastern ancestry, how does the connection between kink and BDSM connect with that area? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there is necessarily like an inherited connection between that particular geographical region and kink, but I think it's definitely it's definitely a global experience of people everywhere around the world, and in some cases it's easier to be able to explore it, go on that journey to learn more about yourself and what you want from it, and then actually engage and build a community around it. It's not easy where you are criminalized, where just kind of the mere fact of being with another person is criminalized, let alone having the state of mind and having the safe space to explore a kink. Because also part of exploring a kink is doing it with, multiple people, different times and on different occasions and different ways, and really learning what you like and don't like about it and how you can build on that. So a lack of space is a lack of opportunity to do that. For me personally, it was not something that at the time was my top priority. I knew that I had my kinks. I knew that I had my interests, and I would find an opportunity to do any of that, but it was very minimal because my priority was somewhere else. My priority was with the work that I was doing and the type of community building, and it was, the community that I find myself in was not a community that I necessarily intentionally went and got every person within it. It just kind of fell into place given the work that I was doing. So also I needed to put that line between people that I'm working with versus people that I'm going to be engaging with sexually or on different things.
Which is a major issue, even in my side of things, where the aspect of especially providing therapy to other LGBT comes, that question is, where is that going to come into play? And yet that never seems to be a thought that comes up as much when we're dealing with the heterosexual world too, as well. That we need that space to be able to decompress from everything that we hear and help people go through. But that need from that boundary is there, and the need that we're still connected to these desires.
Yeah, definitely. You're totally right. And I don't want to judge anyone. I think every person they need to make their own decision for what works for them. For me, that was where the line that I put. I had a partner in Lebanon, and at one point we opened up our relationship, but also we kind of made that decision that let's engage with other people when we travel. And we used to travel a lot because we were both working in the field. We used to travel often, around once a month. So let's play when we're away in the different countries. But when we're back in Lebanon, in Beirut, let's try not to engage as much, because that person is probably going to walk into the center where I work the next day to ask for maybe some help, on a psychological level, or for here, or for So I just didn't want it to muddy the water, especially, I mean, I could, because it's a two people thing, right? Like I can control myself, I can control what I say, and I can be as professional as I want to, but I cannot force others to behave the same. But when I moved here to the US and I started being more open about my kink journey and my post on Facebook or Instagram being more explicit, that the funny thing was, I would just, especially the first, I would say, few months of me doing that, I was getting endless messages from people from the MENA region. People, some of them I knew, some of them I didn't, some of them are activists, some of them are not. But I was getting these messages about people opening up to me about their kink. I was like, oh, you like this? I like that one, but I never got the chance to explore it. And they felt comfortable talking to me about it just from the fact that I was open. And they felt that that's a safe space. And those direct messages, they were just telling me about their journeys and asking me questions. And so that really tells me there's a big desire for a community, and not just for someone to explore their kink individually. There is a need there, and I'm always thinking, like, is there something that I can do from where I am to help foster that? And I haven't gotten the answer yet, but I'll keep thinking about it because I think it's a need. What I got, I'm not talking sexually, what I got, like, personally, emotionally, intellectually, from my ONYX brothers and from the kink community here in San Francisco is invaluable to my growth as a human being and as a person. And it extends outside of the realm of like kink or sex. So I think any chance for someone to learn a new thing about themselves and their community, they should go for it. And kink is definitely one of those.
Well, especially going back to that key thing we were talking about in the first half, which was about community and that sense of community, which comes with that sense of interpersonal relationships with each other.
Yes.
So glad in your experiences and through our pledge process, and as we go forward, has been able to provide a bunch of that.
Definitely. I was overjoyed when I got accepted to be a pledge, and I was like, that's amazing. And I was really committed, heart and soul, into the process to learn as much as I can, and to meet the people and to bond with the people that would eventually become my brothers once I became a full member. And right now I do recognize that the community that I have with my ONYX brothers is the main community that I have no doubt that whatever happens in my life, those people are going to be there for me. And that feeling is amazing. And I wish it on anyone.
Well, and too bad you couldn't make it to Blackout this year, but hopefully you'll make it to our next one.
Yes, I definitely want to make it to the next one.
And just for those wondering, Blackout is the ONYX's convention that happens every 2 years. So we just had one in Fort Lauderdale this year. So we're waiting to find out where we're going to be in 2024.
Yes, 2024.
Yeah. So what do you think is one of the things that would be helpful for people to feel more comfortable starting out in kink, especially with a Middle Eastern background?
Yes, I mean, so people, for me, some of the kinks that right now I'm interested in, some of them I've had an inclination or maybe a desire somewhere in my mind, like, oh, I would like to try that one day, or I think that's hot, and I would like then go and try to, learn or engage. But there are things that I never thought I would enjoy, but I found myself in a place where it was either being, demonstrated in front of me, or someone mentioned it, and it just clicked in my mind. So one of the first advice is, like, don't rule any kink out until you learn a bit more about it. Now, the second thing, which is an advice from our current ONYX chapter president, Graylan, he told me once that whenever you want to try a new kink, start with the best. Because that really would influence your experience and how much you would enjoy it or not, the person that you're doing it with. Choose someone who's really good at it, choose the best at it where you are, and just go to them and ask them. And my experience has been in general that people in the kink community are very open and very generous in their knowledge. And they don't put their knowledge behind closed doors. They're happy to share, and they're happy to teach. So my advice would be just find the best and go for it. Some of it you can read about, some of it you could watch things on, but at one point you have to start experiencing it yourself. And just be open to everything and try everything more than once. And really try to read more about, the importance of communication and consent with a kink, because that also could influence your journey, and that could either, create a really great community around you, or you could be alienated if you're someone who, do not abide by consent and by being openly communicating with others. Because those are very important in kink. And kink people, in the majority of kinks, people become very vulnerable. They put down their walls. They surrender power. There's a lot of power dynamics. So it's a very big responsibility. And when someone does that, you have to take care of them.
Yeah. Well, because I think one of the other areas to that is a lot of people don't understand what actually makes up communication. They believe they do, but there's a lot more bits and pieces of it that come together to allow for not just the words and understanding that is coming out of each of our mouths, but for that interpersonal relationship. And as you said, the vulnerability as you approach that power dynamics. There are ways that through kink, people find healing that could not happen in the quote unquote standard regular world because of the power dynamics that are getting applied there.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I personally had a lot of people coming to me and explaining how much they are control freaks in their regular life and jobs, and they're very either senior and all of that stuff, and how they want to experience surrendering some of that control. And they come to me because I do rope bondage, shibari, and they want to experience it through rope bondage. And one thing that I really love about rope bondage, I mean, you could definitely make it, very sexual and very sexy and very erotic, but also there's a lot that can be done with rope bondage that doesn't touch on sex or genitals or orgasm. You can do a lot. There's a lot of physical sensations and mental state that you get into that you experience through bondage that is not necessarily directly related to orgasm or sexual stimulation. And a lot of people, when someone gives you that much control, you have to really be respectful of that. You have to understand the importance of it. And also that person have the responsibility to properly communicate what they want, what they don't want, and their boundaries. Within flirting and that's kind of social playground and sexual playground, people tend to, people can play games and can, drop hints and wink here. And they don't have to all the time be like 100%, open about everything that they want from you. If you're in a bar, someone's sitting on you, it's a little fun game. It's fun. But with kink, people need to be very clear about what they want and what are their boundaries, and be, they cannot say, oh, I can handle that, it's fine, and not express if they're not feeling good in a seat, or feeling shy about saying exactly what they want or how much they want to push it. And that actually, that is going to result in them having a less of experience, not to say a negative one, but they're going to have a less experience if they're not fully open and honest. And so you really learn how to communicate, and then you go, that type of thing, you learn it, and then it reflects on all facets of your life. You learn how to communicate more with your partners. You know how to communicate with your friends, with your colleagues, with your family. So there's a lot to be learned from really going on a kink journey and doing that.
And that's also part of how we build community, is when we can feel, and a community is a place where we can feel vulnerable and safe in.
Yes. 100%.
But if it's not communicated correctly, you feel isolated. You feel not like you're a part of it.
That's true.
And you can feel that even in the community you grew up in.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And, with time, you get to, and people get, even if you're not at the time putting a lot of focus and attention into understanding someone or telling if they're telling the truth, or if that's with time, as they say, your true colors will show, and the more honest and open you are within your community, the more you bond with that community, and you become more of a unit. And those who cannot do that, you spontaneously see them drifting out and drifting away, and they're no longer a part of that community to the same degree.
All right. So I think we're at a good point now for that classic question I ask many people: is the myths and realities around mental health. And I'm curious, from your view, both as your ancestry and with your travel experience in the communities you're working with, what are some of the myths about mental health, and what do we need to know to dispel and bring the realities around that?
Yeah, I mean, that question takes me back to when I was studying psychology back in Lebanon, and I remember, while the field has been there for a while, I think, at least in Lebanon and a lot of the countries where I go, it's been pretty recent how much people can comfortably say, I go to a therapist, or I need support for mental health. There's a lot of shame and taboo around that subject. It always has been. But I remember when I first started studying psychology, one of the first questions that people would be like, oh, hey, what do you do? I'm meeting new people or friends of friends. And the minute they learn I study psychology, it's like, oh, what do you think about me? Tell me, what do you got from me? And it's like, I was like, I don't have a crystal ball that I'm looking into. And psychology is not just that. It's not that. It's not about me looking at you and just like giving you a list of who you are and your and I do see it as a very deep conversation that happens between people, and your therapist might learn a lot about you, but there are sometimes also you might learn things about yourself that your therapist doesn't know, because you are learning about yourself, and you're leaving that session and going home, and you're reflecting if you're doing that job and that exercise, and you're learning more about yourself, and you might express it to your therapist the next time or not, but it's something that you've learned. And coming from a country and a region that was predominantly led by religious thinking and the way they approach life, a lot of the times, when people are dealing with these issues, with mental health issues, the first thing they go to is religion and their faith. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing in a way. That I think if you have something that can give you any type of emotional relief, then that works for you, right? Like that's your mechanism of dealing with that. But not on the, but you cannot deny the importance of science and what people, what psychology and psychotherapy can offer you from that perspective. Also I mentioned early on when we were talking, when I was at the monastery, I was interested in exorcism and how exorcists needed to know the difference, which is interesting because, at the heart of this, I mean, there's nothing more theological than talking about someone being possessed by a demon, right? Like that's way deep into religion and theology, and even there, they are telling you make sure it's not a psychological thing, but people tend to like really kind of not believe that much in the importance of psychotherapy as a science itself. And another thing is, I mean, the shame around it is very big, and very few would hesitate if there's any type of physical ailment to go see a doctor. And that's how I would always tell people. I mean, it's the same, if you broke your hand, you go to a doctor, and if you broke your heart, you could also go to a doctor. And they will help you heal. You still have to do the healing on your own. Your body still have to do the healing. You still have to do something. You might do rehabilitation if it's physical. So also if it's mental, you might need to do some work on your own to get better. But look at it the same, and remove the shame around it. And that I've seen it not just in Lebanon or the MENA region. I've seen it around the world when I've traveled to different countries, the way they look at psychology and psychotherapy the same. But it's definitely changing, and the newer generation is more accepting, and the more people are opening up about their journey with mental health and their journey with seeking help. We are seeing it change. So we hope that continues, and mental health awareness, especially within our community.
Yeah, that it's actually given more. I don't think respect's the right word. That it is something that everyone actually needs. Not all at the exact same moments in time, but that it is needed throughout life, because there's so many different things that will overwhelm, that can be new and different to a way that you don't know how to deal with them, and you find that part of yourself.
Yes, definitely. And a lot of the times, putting aside if there's a need for medication, a lot of the things that psychology calls for sometimes in treatment and in healing are things that we know as human beings that are there for a long time. A walk in nature, playing sports, spending quality time with loved ones. I mean, those are things that are healing in psychology as much as they are in humanity from day one we know about. And I think making it more as part of your life and part of your journey, just seeking support for your mental health and understanding yourself, and when you need that support and when you can make it on your own, and that support could be at multiple levels. It doesn't always have to be an intensive, twice a week therapist. It could also, it's just this mindfulness and this reflection that if you can bring it into your life and really reflect on why you do things and the effect of things on you, and try to identify patterns that would, that you have in your life and how they get a specific reaction from you, whether it's a positive or a bad reaction, and your coping mechanism, just understanding yourself.
Well, I hope everyone can take that to heart and will be able to explore that when they're meeting on new people, but especially meeting anyone from the Middle East and North Africa. That experience is going on just as equally for them.
Yes, definitely. I mean, one thing I would say, maybe, I don't want to say unique because I cannot assume to know the experiences of other people, but just to talk about Lebanon. I mean, Lebanon as a country historically has been colonized just like so many times. I mean, it's one of the oldest countries that are mentioned in the books, right? And I think Byblos in Lebanon is probably one of the most continuously inhabited cities in the world, that has been there and has people living in it since since the early days, because a lot of the early civilization were in that region,
right?
And there's we inherited a lot of collective trauma from our ancestors.
Now there's something that's not talked often about. Is the generational trauma.
Exactly. And we inherited all of that, but we've also went through it ourselves. I mean, I was born in 85, and that was, at the heart of the civil war that was happening in Lebanon. And I might not remember much about it, but I definitely deal with the consequences of it. The consequences of it on my parents, on my friends, on my city, on my country in general, and the political consequences that we're still dealing with till now, and all the decisions that were made. And then since then, we've dealt with a lot of, political unrest and social and civil unrest that was happening in the country. And, recently we had a big explosion that happened in Beirut.
The grain silo.
That shook the whole country, and then the economic collapse. So it's like there's definitely a deep level of trauma that no one has been dealing with, and no one knows how to deal with. And I think, there's definitely that helps with resilience, and I can recognize how resilient everyone is, but also it definitely has some things that, like, some negative consequences that are not rooted in every person. And I think, that's why one of the things that I've done and you mentioned it in the bio, is I was engaged a little bit in drama therapy, and drama therapy really helps with that type of thing. And it really helps with healing some of that generational and collective trauma, because you get to play some of those things in front of you and react with that reality that is in your mind or that you've heard about it.
Or that you want to have different.
Exactly. And you want a different outcome of it. So that's one of the things that I would say about Lebanon and the MENA region, just that long history of unrest, and not just political, just, as I mentioned, these are all civilizations that have generation after generation dealt with obstacles, dealt with wars, and since 9/11, the whole region dealt just with racism on top of that. So it's like never-ending hits, and people still standing and still doing their thing, and there's a lot of respect for how resilient everyone is.
Right. Well, resiliency and coping is part of the process, but it's not an end-all goal. It's not something that is supposed to be done in perpetuity.
Yeah.
There's a point where you have to actually stop and move away from those things to actually deal with healing, even if you're going to have to go back into it. And that's, again, one of those notions that you can cope and resilience your way throughout everything forever. It's like, no. It's going to catch
up to you.
Yeah, things will break down. Things broke. I mean, just to bring into that physical sense, that grain silo blowing up, those circumstances, somebody was trying to resil and cope for as long as they could, and eventually it blew.
Yep,
just to use it as a metaphor for the reality of it. And 100%. That can't happen. We can't have it. That will happen, and it does happen when we deal with people's mental health, and it can be much more destructive than it can be destructive anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we do, even the words that we use, right? Like, it's a coping mechanism. It's not a solution.
Exactly.
It's not the end of the story. I'm coping till I find a solution, but the solution needs to be found.
And that solution may ultimately be a complete different reaction or existence than what you've been living.
Yes.
So are you willing to now go with that other existence, which I think for many of us, coming out and accepting who we are was one of those things of finding peace finally.
Yeah, finding our own truth and then being able to deal with the other truth in our life and in the world around us.
Exactly. So where can folks find you if they want to continue to learn more and even support your work?
Well, I mentioned the website before for the organization where I work. I can mention it again. It's www.mpactglobal.org. M-Pact is M-P-A-C-T. And then I am personally, on Facebook, if people want to reach out, I'm very happy. It's Johnny Tohme, Tohme. I'm very happy to connect with people there. The same on Instagram. On Instagram, it's I use it more for community and bondage and kink. So if people want to connect there.
Yeah, if you're looking for that, that's a place to go. Otherwise, the rest of the stuff, you know where to find them.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I want to thank you again for being on here and being willing to share this, and look forward to our next ONYX outing as well.
Yes, I'm looking forward. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great discussion, and maybe we'll have another one in the future. Oh, so I got to figure out what I'm going to do for June too. So, all righty. So be well. And right now we're recording this just before Christmas here. But obviously you'll be hearing this in March. So hopefully you guys have a great spring and a start of the seasonal new year as we head into summer.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.